Um, so right at the corner of Saunders and Salem Street, it was a mixed-use building, core and shell, and I had the opportunity to work with Tira and John there. So tonight, what they're going to be discussing, they have a presentation to discuss adaptive reuse, or what we also call historic renovation. So they've got a lot of experience working in downtown Durham. They've done a lot of work at American Tobacco as well as Golden Belt. So I think tonight will be a very eye-opening, interesting talk to kind of, open your mind to different possibilities in investing, right? With a lot of old buildings, I think you're limited only by your creativity, right? So I'm going to turn this over to John, and we'll go ahead and get started here. So.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having us. Tira and I have worked pretty extensively for, I would say, almost 10 years now. And my journey started, I moved to North Carolina from Washington, D.C. in 1995. I started working in downtown Durham about 1996. My first impression was walking around downtown was, what the hell happened here? And it was basically an abandoned city. The good news is all the buildings were here, just people weren't. And I was fortunate to live in Baltimore in the late 70s, early 80s. And then I would go back to Baltimore about every month or two over a period of about 5 or 10 years. And I saw them completely rebuild a city. And I told myself, if I ever saw that again, I wanted to get immersed in it. And then I found myself in Durham, and I said, this is like Baltimore was in, 1980. And I was fortunate to get involved at American Tobacco pretty early on. People look at American Tobacco today and think, wow, what a home run, what a great project. Those guys really, did that. At the time, I don't think anybody had any idea how successful that project would become. I mean, I think a lot of people in corporate region here, Glaxo, Duke said, yeah, we'll put some money towards that, but good luck with that. But the Goodmans did it. They really pulled that project off, and we were fortunate to be involved in a lot of very early projects there, and have done, I would say, 1 million square feet of work all over that campus. What we really did that I think was clever was we took the revenue from that as an architecture firm and used it to start redeveloping projects in downtown Durham itself. And the bet was that, well, if they're putting this kind of money into American Tobacco, hopefully that success will happen downtown as well. And that doesn't happen by accident. I mean, I got involved with a group called Downtown Durham Inc., whose entire mantra was about melding the private and public sectors to really put a vision together about what a city could be. And we met monthly. I was on the executive committee for 10 or 15 years and really worked very hard at making Durham a success, kind of one building, one block at a time, but really under the umbrella of a big picture of how can you rebuild a city. I think Duke was instrumental in that project as well, because Duke, for better or worse, thinks it competes with Harvard and London School of Economics and places like that. And they recognize to get the talent they need at an academic level, they need a place that those kind of people would want to move to. And that was a lot of what drove Duke to get very involved in helping downtown go. So as you look for opportunities, I think around the country, I would always look for places that have an academic institution or some other large institution that can help drive the success in a town or a place. So, Tira, do you have that show? Let's go ahead and bring that on. Next. So this is a photograph I basically started to drop logos on projects that we have done in Durham. And I was kind of blown away by how many buildings we had touched in downtown Durham over the course of 20 years. The cluster on the left, lower left, is American Tobacco. And then the tracks, the railroad tracks, kind of cut the city in half, if you will, running east-west. And everything north of that is kind of what's known as downtown. About, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, we were approached by a client out of New York, LRC Properties, who'd done a project in downtown Raleigh with us, 227 Fayetteville Street. They said, hey, we're interested in buying a building in East Durham at the old Golden Belt campus. Do you know anything about that? And I said, I know Golden Belt, sure. So back in the day, a fellow named Andy Rothschild with Scientific Properties bought Golden Belt, and this is probably 1998, 2000 or so. And he wanted to create a complex on the east side of town on this campus that would be centered on the arts and be a mixed use center. And back in that period of time, East Durham in that area was a pretty intense neighborhood, let's put it that way. But Andy did it. He got that project done. And he was now, about 5 years ago now, getting ready to cash out of that and sell it. And the LRC folks decided they would end up buying it. And so we worked with them on that. So we put together 3 videos, and they were really about trying to tell the story of what could happen on that campus. And what we worked on was trying to, and we do this really on all of our projects. I think every project needs a story. Like, why is it different? Why should I come here? Why would I want to live there? Why would I want to work there? And so I think coming up with the story is pretty key. I was fortunate to listen to a lot of podcasts and meet a fellow out of San Diego with a company called Bread Truck Films, Jeff Durkin, and he turns out to be this great intersection of architect and cinematographer and documentary maker. And I told him about the project, and he said, boy, I'd love to help you with that. And so for about $30,000, he helped us craft these 3 videos. So I'd like to play them tonight. They'll be over with in about 10 minutes, but let's go. They're in sequence of the vision of the project, the tenants, and the attraction. And the last one is the completed project. So it's kind of a quick trilogy. So why don't we fire that up? And then go to the full screen here.
People built this building 100 years ago. They had their lives in it, their livelihood in it. All kinds of things happened in this building. It sort of gets abandoned, and we come along and we pick it up. We grab onto what someone else gave us. We leave an open link for the next person.
You're going to have sculptures that are going to come to light. You're going to have art. You're going to have murals, beer garden, brewery. We're going to have music, food trucks, coffee roaster here and cafe, revitalizing the community and allow this historic building to live again and breathe again.
This factory was a textile factory really based on pouches for shipping tobacco.
This was a place where people came together, worked together, and lived together. You've seen a lot of change because tobacco went away, so people lost jobs. And so the community went through a transition. And that transition was not necessarily positive impact on the community, you lost value. And then there was this sense of people moving away from East Durham. I see Golden Belt as transitioning and transforming with the community. What's in need of is some love and some investment. And that's what this Golden Belt project will provide. The
vision for the campus is to think of a very broad definition of the word arts. So the art of software writing, the art of brewing. What's interesting when you look at this in terms of a campus instead of a building, we realize we sort of have an opportunity to create 3 distinct little courtyards that are all linked together.
So when people come to office here, they're walking through culture. They're walking through essentially a museum.
So there was always this interest in having artists in and around other businesses.
I feel like every artist in this area has somehow gone through Golden Belt.
Well, we wanted to be in Golden Belt because of the artist community in this area. You know, it creates this vibe and this excitement, and then people want to come and look at it and see what's going on and find out more about it.
We've moved from Durham being this kind of tobacco industry city to more like technology and cross culture and people getting engaged with one another. And this building is a part of that process.
Bring the best artisans in those various fields and professions to this site. That's going to be a home run.
You know, here you could have a big grouping of buildings and offices and spaces. It lends itself to being a community.
You know, public spaces, people can eat and drink and look at art and shop. It should draw a ton of people over here. I think it'll be really exciting.
Just kind of coming together again and building a new city. I think this is going to be a great part of the new city of Durham. The transformation will be powerful. I don't like to brag, I don't like to fuss. My zodiac sign is Aquarius. I'm just playing.
Yeah, I like that.
So that was kind of what we went out to the market with to try and sell the project. And then the next one is kind of the tenants we started to recruit.
Some of the most brilliant people over the course of humanity were architects and engineers and artists and cooks. Every industry needs creativity in order to innovate. And so if we all help each other, we can create more interest, we can create more buzz. We have more of a reason to bring people to one location to see all of us.
The central theme early on was to take a very broad view of the arts. The idea of seeing the artists walking around in their garb and paint splatters, mixing with biotech chemists and solar engineers. Those kind of people all mixing and mashing together is the vision of what this campus should be.
Shouts to Durham.
We saw that there was this old coal plant and there was an opportunity to turn that into our headquarters. Strata as a company, the reason why we exist is we wanted to create a cleaner world, and that's really by providing solar energy. And one of the ways that we do that is by offsetting coal. Durham is one of the fastest growing areas, and we wanted to be a part of that growth, and we thought that we can make an impact on the community, and the community can make an impact on Strata and our employees.
Durham really is kind of the epicenter of the arts and crafts community of this region, and it is an incredibly important part of Highwire's story. It'll be a bunch of games and some outdoor space and communal tables, and it'll just be kind of a cool place for people to kind of feel part of the campus.
I think people in general are gravitating more towards campuses like this, where it's not just like one company, one thing, one focus. They need a little bit more enrichment to their lives, and having a multifaceted place like this really helps that.
The old building is an old textile mill primarily, and that was the economic engine in manufacturing in this part of the country. Today, technology is the economic engine, and ultimately we are manufacturers, but instead of making textiles and wool and tobacco. We're making digital products, whether they're apps or websites. But ultimately, we're building things. They're just different things that people built 120 years ago.
When I first got here, like, the building was nothing, and now it's like, it's coming together, so. It opened up doors for more jobs, you know, and I feel like people will be more encouraged to get out into the world and pursue a career. And rather than having to leave their home, maybe they can pursue a career here in Durham, maybe here at Goldenbelt.
It's full of memories from when people worked here. We're creating memories in it, and then we're taking those stories out and spreading them, and that's a really solid project.
Food, traditions, music, everything that's local to Durham and that part of Durham, we want to really embrace, because that's what gives us all collectively roots and roots together, which we think is really important to being part of a community.
It's going to give us something that we can be proud of, and we're going to be able to say that we turned this old campus into something special.
And then the last one is basically the finished project. Definitely been a journey. It's a project that started with a big vision and an idea about how to make arts the center of the community. You see this surge every weekend of more and more people. I think we're on top of something really big here.
My hope is that Goldenbelt will have a transformational impact, open up minds, break down barriers, and challenge people to dream big.
This factory was a textile factory really based on pouches for shipping tobacco. It sort of gets abandoned, and we come along and we pick it up. We grab onto what someone else gave us. We leave an open link for the next person.
This was a place where people came together, worked together, and lived together.
Shouts to Durham.
You've seen a lot of change because tobacco went away, so people lost jobs. And so the community went through a transition.
The vision for the campus is to think of a very broad definition of the word arts. So the art of software writing, the art of brewing.
We're going to have music, food trucks, coffee roaster here and cafe, revitalizing the community and allow this historic building to live again and breathe again.
Durham really is kind of the epicenter of the arts and crafts community of this region, and it is an incredibly important part of Highwire's story. There'll be a bunch of games and some outdoor space and communal tables, and it'll just be kind of a cool place for people to kind of feel part of the campus.
All of this was covered up, and we had this idea that, well, we have this great courtyard we're creating in the center of the campus. We have all of our people arriving over here. How do we connect them? So we just decided to create this gallery that really links the whole campus together. So it becomes this great series of collisions between arts, parking, food, beer, that when you mix them up, becomes something much better.
We saw that there was this old coal plant, and there was an opportunity to turn that into our headquarters. And we wanted to be a part of that growth, and we thought that we can make an impact on the community, and the community can make an impact on Strata and our employees.
here on a Sunday afternoon and there's 400 people on this campus. There wasn't 400 people here on this campus when it was in its heyday. We now have people that are doing software here. We have people here doing solar technology. We have people doing plant science. We have city offices. So it's this combination of all those things that really makes it work. And the alchemy involved in that is something we had a sense of would be a good idea. I don't think we had a sense of how great an idea it would become.
Whether it's music, whether it's art, doing bilingual storytelling, we're mixing it all up so that everyone in the community, when they think of the summertime, when they think of performing arts, they think of Golden Belt.
It existed as a husk of a building. They saw the potential in it, and they let their imaginations run away with them in the best way possible. And what we have some years later is the new Golden Belt Artist Warehouse.
So that was kind of a trilogy of films that we used to kind of tell the story there. These images on the slide here are just different projects that we've been involved with in Durham, and they vary in scale from that campus to, you know, individual buildings. They're all tax credit projects, so we've been able to successfully write the proposals for the tax credits on most of these, as well as, you know, work on the design as well. So I'm pretty versed at this point on both ends of that. And several of these projects are projects that we're also investors in and stakeholders in. So I'm a big believer in, there's no reason the architects and designers and other people can't be part of these projects. So next. This is a pretty interesting project. This is in downtown Durham, and the photo on the top is a picture of a building that had been clad in that red brick, probably, I'm guessing, in the, I don't know, 1980s, and it was part of a historic building that you couldn't tell was there unless once you got inside the building. We could see, when we took the drywall off the interior, the original openings. And then I went to the preservation people in the Office of Cultural Resources in Raleigh and said, you know, you're saying this building is a non-contributing building, but I actually think the original building is underneath this brick. And they said, well, you know, show that to us. And we did. We took the red brick off and realized that this project could qualify for historic tax credits because the original structure and the facade were all there. And we peeled those off, renovated the building, and the photo at the bottom is that building restored. And it went from, you know, a project that had no tax credits to getting historic tax credits. And, you know, the owner, it's an owner-occupied building, so Joe Palapi with Bronto kept all those tax credits himself. But to me, it was a great lesson in, just because someone says a building isn't qualifying or so forth, if you can do a little bit of scratching around and investigative work, you can probably get tax credits on buildings that are in historic districts downtown. Next. So I just wanted to share real quickly, all the projects we've shown you today have used historic tax credits. And the fastest way to get engaged with that is if you can find a downtown or a place where there's already a registered historic district, you're a long way down the road towards being able to do a tax credit qualified project. And the first thing you want to find out is the building contributing? There's usually two categories that you want to look at. Is it contributing or non-contributing? Non-contributing pretty much means the building won't qualify, but as I just showed you, the building before actually was labeled non-contributing, but it turned out it was. A contributing building makes the project a lot easier to do. the first step in getting it qualified is submitting a statement of significance, which basically goes to the state and you make your case as to why the building is worthy of tax credits. If it's a contributing building, it's very easy because it's already kind of there. Once you have that approved, the program breaks into two levels. There's a state level and a federal level, and they both kind of mirror each other very closely. Part A is basically the state of North Carolina form, and then part 1 and 2 are the federal. And what they do is you're basically describing the building and its elements, like the facades, the windows, the roof, so forth. And you're saying, this is the condition it's in, and this is what we're proposing we're going to do to it. Once you get the state to approve that, they then forward that to the federal government. You normally submit both at the same time. And then once you get your part 2 approved, you're pretty much good to go ahead and do all the work that you're proposing you're going to do. You can also use the tax credits at that stage, with the risk of, if you somehow don't achieve the project in the final approval, that you'll forfeit the tax credits, but I've never seen that happen. So the last submittal you do is a part B, which is at the state, and part 3 at federal, and that's where you basically submit finished photos of the project. You tell them, you know, look, we said we were going to do this, we did that. And you qualify for tax credits at that point. The state, I think, is generally around 15% now, and federal are 20%. So it's a pretty good discount on your project. And there's two ways you can work with those tax credits. One is you can keep them yourself and use them in the LLC that you probably formed. I've tended to keep most of mine in my LLC. The other route people take is they will try and sell them to a syndicator. Those usually get discounted. It's a fluctuating market, but probably at 80%. So if you created $1 million of tax credits and you sold them to Chevron, Chevron would give you $800,000 towards your project for being involved in it. So that's a way to fund projects. The Golden Belt project did that. They sold their tax credits. In my experience, most people who are selling tax credits want to have a value, I would say probably at least $3 or $4 million before people are interested in working with it. I have heard, but I haven't used them, that there's now people looking at smaller projects for that. And the basis for that is really the construction cost in the project. So qualified real estate expenses on those are construction, interest during construction, all the consultant fees. You can also include fees for yourself as a developer in that. So that, tax credit is really 20 or 30% of the value of those qualified real estate investments. So next. And then these are some really good links. Hopefully, if you guys record this or use it, you can use these links. But one is basically state of North Carolina. They have a very good department. Those folks are really terrific in working on these. And then links to the federal programs as well. This is run through the Department of Interior out of Washington. And they have a lot of really good literature on their websites for how to do these. Can you zoom into that, Tira? And I can email these to, in fact, you can send this PowerPoint out, David. I mean, there's nothing proprietary in here.
Sure.
So that is like a lightning fast overview of, projects we've been involved in and tax credits and so forth. Hopefully there's something useful there for folks. Happy to field any questions, things like that.
Yeah, that was great, John. I appreciate it. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute or put them in the chat. I can read them off. I could start off, I guess, just one general question. When you talk about so you had, I think on that slide, you had 15% state, 20% federal, or it might have been opposite.
Yes.
Are
Yeah.
those, do they compound? So that would be 35%
Yes,
total?
that's
Okay, wow.
exactly right. And like if you've got a site that has other kind of credits or grants or things associated with it, they don't cancel each other out. It all gets piled on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very powerful program. And like the LRC guys out of New York, they had never done a tax credit project before. And they were highly skeptical. They felt like, oh, well, they're not going to let us do the kind of things we would want to do. I mean, look at that Golden Belt project. I mean, there's plenty of things there that are not like complete restoration of like an old building. I mean, there's a restoration there, but you can layer on new construction, new concepts, skyline. I mean,
right.
Don't be intimidated by the word historic.
Does the cost of land add on to that? So you've got sort of your hard construction. The cost of land is separate. So you've got all your
land does not qualify, nor does site work.
Okay, so the initial purchase of the building does not qualify.
It's the money you're putting into it. So construction, consultants, interest when you're doing it, insurance, things like that. So.
Hey, John, pretty cool project. I'm impressed. I like it. I'm down in Charlotte, so I haven't seen it firsthand. But anyway, question for you. When you see a potential project like that, obviously you have to submit some stuff to the state, get it approved. So this building's sitting there, it's probably for sale or its own. At what point are you buying the building? Is it after you've gotten approval from the state and you know it's gonna qualify for the tax credits and everything? That's when you're actually buying the building and moving forward with things?
So two categories, well, several comments there. In Charlotte, we're working at Savona Mill. Tier is actually working on that. So I don't know if you know that site, but that's a tax credit project. And the other one is over at Camp North End. So two really different kind of buildings, but both have qualifying, tax credit things on them. What I jokingly tell people, I like to buy buildings in neighborhoods when they look like Fallujah, because that doesn't bother me. I mean, I get there's going to be, they're cheap then, right? So the worse it looks, almost the better off you are when you're trying to acquire things. But it takes a certain amount of, I think, guts and just sort of imagination to say, well, what you're it's not this that you're looking at, it's going to be something completely different. Most people don't, I think, a lot of developers are very spooked by those kind of projects. So, which is good, right? It means there's fewer people looking at it. But I don't know how a lot of these like Golden, oh, that's an important question you asked. So when you buy a project like that and you do it, you need to hold on to it for 5 years. So like Golden Belt will probably go up for sale, I would say, in the next couple of years or so. But the people who do the project initially need to hold on to it for 5 years.
And just so I'm clear, so you guys did buy the project before you submitted it to the state, hoping to be
yes. Yeah, LRC bought it. LRC bought that project before they knew they were going to get the tax credits.
Okay, so you're buying it with the risk that it may not be approved, and you're stuck with this building that's not approved, or
yes, but I have rarely seen a project not get approved. You have a pretty good idea pretty early on if it's going to work. And that's the thing, like the people at Department of Cultural Resources will be happy to go meet you on a site and walk through it and say, yeah, that looks like a project we could do tax credits on. So I think one of the things that's important about that whole program is they want it to work. You know, they're not really, it's one of the few regulatory places where I've seen where it seems like they're trying to make it happen, right? Versus like gatekeepers about like, no, you can't do that. So.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for John? You can unmute or you can put them in the chat.
Hey, are all states typically have these projects, these programs?
Yes, they do. And different states are, I haven't done too much in South Carolina, but I would suspect like in a city like Charleston, it's probably a lot stricter. I found West Virginia was great. They were very good with it. Virginia is pretty good. You know, and it probably depends on the building you're working on, right? If you're working on the state capitol, they're going to be really stringent. You know, if you're working on an industrial building that's been abandoned and people want to breathe some life into it, again, they're motivated to try and make that happen. North Carolina had a program that we did one project in. It was called the Mill Restoration Tax Credit. And they gave you actually, I think, 35% on that in the state. And the qualifications were it needed to be a building that was used in manufacturing, needed to have been closed or not in use for, I think, 1 year or 2 years, and then it would qualify. But that was really targeted at taking, you know, industrial buildings that, you know, or factories and things that closed or been shipped offshore and bringing them back in service.
I have a question. You said that it's best to hold on to it for 5 years. Could you go into depth about why this is so? I have an idea, but I would like for you to.
It's just part of the program. They require you to, I think you have to use the tax credits within 5 years. So they require you to hold on to it. And they don't, the beauty of it too is like after 5 years, you can change the building. Like you don't, you could then modify it, renovate it, do whatever you want to it, but they want it held like intact for 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
John, could you talk from a, oh, I think I had someone else. Go ahead. I don't want to take up.
No, I was just going to take advantage of the momentary break to say, I'm only say this one time, if y'all want the recording of this meeting, it would be posted on the calendar tomorrow. Go to the calendar, click on this meeting, and scroll down, and the recording will be there. Sorry, David.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, John, I was just going to ask, you know, could you talk about maybe some specific kind of design, sort of design elements that kind of you guys go through when you're looking at a building like this? You know, what is your thought process? Kind of what things have you, did you integrate into it? So
yeah, great question. So the first thing I do when I look at a building like these is think about how do I get it stabilized, right? Water is the most devastating thing to any one of these buildings. And you want to like you don't have to put a permanent roof on it yet, but like get it stabilized, right? You don't want any more damage to occur. You want a very good mason, and you want a mason who is familiar with working with older buildings. You want a good crew that can work with usually heavy timber. Most of these buildings are heavy timber. In my experience, it's almost impossible to know how much damage there is to roof structures in the timber, because think of it, the water is coming down through the roof and it's sitting in those big heavy beams, and it's almost like a cavity, right? And you can't, the bottom of the beam looks good, but the rot is really on top of it. And so in almost all these projects, we've tried to do some borings and check on that. And if we discover 15% or 20% of the beams seem to have problems, maybe it's even broken, I would double it and say, count on half of these are going to need to be replaced, right? A lot of them have wood floors in them as well. So a good wood flooring person is a pretty key person. Often the windows in these buildings, there's two paths there. You can either restore them. Double Hung is, I think, the best group in the state at dealing with restoration on that. Double Hung, I think they're out of Greensboro, but you know, getting a really good window package, those are the most expensive parts usually. But the first thing you want to do is get it stabilized so damage doesn't get any worse than it is. I also tell people, like a lot of our clients, when they're setting up a project like this, park 20% for contingency. You're gonna find things, you just are. So just make sure you've got plenty of capital there to deal with it as it comes up. So.
Does the restoration have to be according to, you know, historic specs, or is this totally different?
Yeah, those links I sent you, there's a series of guidelines from the Department of Interior. Those are exactly what you want to work with. And they're pretty good about explaining what they're looking for. So they've got some idiosyncrasies to them. So like one that a lot of people want the inside of the building to be brick if there's brick in it. But if there's been plaster over the brick and it's been a certain kind of use, then they want you to come back and put drywall over the brick or restore the plaster. They generally frown on things like chipping off all the old plaster to make it look like a brick wall. If it was an industrial building previously, they give you a lot more latitude about that. But if it were like a downtown office building or bank and it had dry plaster on it, they want to see plaster restored, not take the plaster off and make it a brick wall.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do this on smaller scale projects too? Like, let's say there's a old large house that's been made into a triplex or something, so it's income producing. Is that
yes
or small?
Yeah. And I haven't done too much residential restoration for tax credits, but yeah, and that's another key point. These are all income producing projects. So
yeah, I imagine there's definitely opportunity to, like, I don't think Golden Belt has any residential portion to it, but I imagine that would not.
It does actually.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, a lot of those projects that we showed in that slide too are like the building on the corner from where I'm sitting now, where Rue Claire is in downtown. That's a 3,000 square foot floor plate, 2 stories, 6,000 square foot building. And think of any downtown, we were talking about it earlier, David, like a Main Street on a downtown in a small North Carolina town.
Yeah.
That's perfect material for these kind of projects.
Right.
I have another question. As I have a property in South Carolina, and since while you were talking, I just looked it up. So when I look it up on the historic register, it says historic property and it gives the address and there's a picture of it. It gives a bunch of information. But when I scroll down, it says National Register determination not eligible. Does that mean it's not eligible?
Huh. Yeah, I would say it's not eligible. I'm not quite sure why, but
yeah, it's weird.
It may be, well, that goes back to that concept of contributing and non-contributing. So if you think of any downtown, there's usually a period of significance where they're saying, look, most of the downtown was built between 1900 and 1940, let's say. And they think of it, that was the period of significance. And so buildings that were built in that period are really the ones that fall into line with that. Like a bank that was built in 1960 that was kind of a modern building isn't really in that period of significance. So a lot of times those buildings are called, you know, they're not contributing. So, and that's in a historic district.
Yeah,
and if
so
you go,
could it-
most
could it also
planning
be-
groups, good.
Sorry, could it also be that it's not in the historic district? Does that be a
It
reason?
could be, yeah, it
Because I
could
don't think
be,
it is in a historic district.
yeah. That's what I was saying, a historic district makes it really easy because someone's already done all the legwork for you. Like if you had a building, I saw a really interesting presentation in LA probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I think they go back, I think the period is, I think it's 50 years or something like that. If you think about 50 years, that's like 1970. So they were using historic tax credits on buildings that were built like shopping malls and things. And the concept was, well, you know, shopping malls were historic in that they basically reflected retailers leaving downtowns to create these new building types that were shopping malls. And people were starting to get historic tax credits on buildings from the 70s, you know, which you don't think of as being historic, but on that criteria of 50 years, they are, so.
What did you say the name of the department is that gives the tax credit?
In North Carolina, it's the Department of Cultural Resources. If you Google like North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources, historic tax credits, you'll get a whole bunch of information. And then on the federal level, it's the Department of Interior, Historic Preservation, or Historic Tax Credits.
Okay.
Hey, John, would those projects have worked financially without the tax credits, or the tax credits is what made them a feasible project?
But it works both ways. I've always done my projects. They need to work without the tax credits, but if you get them, it's great. Golden Belt, I think those guys relied pretty heavily on it once they figured out they could get them. And they sold them. I don't know who bought theirs. It might have been Bank of America.
So how does that work to sell them? I'm not familiar with that concept.
Yeah, there's a group out of Charlotte that's an accounting firm. I'll need to follow up with you. Maybe I've got it. It's called Sherbert, and they are probably the best people in North Carolina for dealing with that.
Sherbert Consulting Group.
Yeah. And those guys are really good at going to market and figuring out who's buying tax credits and things. They'll do all the tax. Yeah, Sherbert Consulting. Yeah, it's SHERBERT. They're in Charlotte, and that's all these. Well, I don't know what else they do, but I know that they do this pretty heavily, and they're really good at that.
I think one thing I want to add is before you start any project, obviously, you really need to have your financial model together. In other words, you need to understand what income you're expecting, or how are you willing to be paying for it, with or without tax credit. So that's the huge step before you decide.
Is there any more opportunity in downtown Durham?
I think I'm finding downtown to be very expensive. I'm candidly working more in East Durham. When we did Golden Belt, I kind of realized, that was like dropping a pebble in the pond, and projects would ripple out from that. So we're doing a lot of work at Anger and Driver now. There's like a little East Durham neighborhood there that's got some great old buildings in it that actually there's a historic district there. I think there's a lot of opportunity in smaller towns throughout North Carolina that, particularly after COVID, people can work from home. Like, if I can live in Sanford and drive into Raleigh 1 or 2 days a week, I think there's a lot more opportunity in those places than there is in downtown Durham right now. And downtown Durham, I think, has just been priced out, sort of.
Now,
Yeah, I
when
mean,
you're restoring these buildings, what, and I may have missed this earlier, what type of use did you restore them to? Was it retail or industrial?
Most of them are retail on the ground floor. Some have residential on the second floor. Some have commercial on the upper floors. And to get a perspective, I was buying buildings in 2000 for like $100,000, you know, $150,000. So crazy low benchmarks on these buildings. Those same buildings now are easily $2-3 million buildings, you know.
Wow.
So finding those kind of places is kind of where I like to look, you know.
How long was the project? Did it take you?
I think it took 20 years. I think all of these projects, like downtown Durham, I look at American Tobacco, downtown and Golden Belt as really one project. You know, it was really an arc of rebuilding a whole city that, you know, each individual project may take a year or two, but really in combination, it's a 20-year project, you know. So I have always taken the long view on all these. It's not about fix it, flip it, on to the next one. It's usually about fix it. It makes the one next to it more valuable. Do that one next. Get to the next one. Several years ago, there's a group that was in Durham that was going to come in and renovate everything. And I just couldn't believe that was possible, because there's just not enough contractors, architects, everyone else. Every one of these projects is like a one-off little specialty, you know. They're all different. So to go in and say, I'm going to do them all at once is virtually impossible.
You know, but just to answer your question, Golden Belt itself, I lived on that campus for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's how long it took from design to construction. And it's still going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, well, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to email me. I got my email in the chat. Yeah, I do. I like to echo what John said. I mean, I think this model can be certainly sort of, you know, replicated among small towns all over, right? I mean, I think I drove through Kinston, right, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I drove down the main street, and my eyes just I was like, man, there is so much opportunity here, right? I mean, so I think what they've done here, you know, like John said, it's probably, for the average investor, probably priced out in large degree, but, you know, for a lot of these towns that are still within an hour and a half of Raleigh, Durham, you know, there's certainly that opportunity. And if they can qualify for those credits, it can maybe be the difference between your project being viable or non-viable, especially if it's income producing, you can add a residential element to it. So
I think an interesting town is Oxford. It's right on 85. It's like, I don't know, 45-minute, 30-minute drive from Durham. And with the connector in Durham now, you can like be down 85 and into RTP in no time. So, I mean, I look for those kind of towns.
Hey, John, are you doing anything like in between Charlotte and Raleigh, the triad area, you know, Greensboro?
We end up doing a project in Greensboro every couple years. Don't really own anything there. Charlotte, we just kind of got involved in Camp North End, and that had that really came out of a relationship we had from Chapel Hill. It was a developer out of New York, Atco, that bought building on Franklin Street, and then they ended up buying that project down in Charlotte and asked us to look at it. And then Savannah Mill came very much out of what the work we did at Golden Belt. They kind of looked at that and said, that's the template. How do we do that? So.
Excellent. Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, John and Tira, we're very grateful to have you guys on. This was a incredible presentation. And if anyone has any other questions, email me. I'll respond, or I'll forward them to John and Tira. And we will make the recording available as well on the website, on the NCREA website, on the calendar. So go to the link for tonight and you can find the recording there. So Kathy, do you have anything else you want to share before we cut off here?
No, John, Tara, thank you so much. That was great.
Awesome. Thank you. Happy to
Excellent. All right. Thank you guys. And y'all,
have a good night.
everyone have a great night. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.